What is going on, guys? In today's video, I'm going to go through how I lost £300,000 in the social or supported living industry as a UK property investor. Now, what you see on social media, everybody knows what social housing and supported living is apparently, but not many people actually do. And so today, you're going to go through a lot of source. I'm going to give you absolutely everything I know about it. So strap in because it's going to be a good one. Now, how am I qualified to talk about this topic? Well, I've got a £6.5 million property portfolio. I've done over 130 social and supported living units delivered, and this is not sourced. This is me buying them in, refurbing them, leasing them, and then either keeping them or selling them. To do this, I raised £11 million. If you don't know who I am, I'm Aston Haslam. You've probably seen me on Instagram and you've seen a lot of my stuff before. And I currently have 80 current supported living tenants. So I'm currently doing this model, okay? But what actually happened to me was I lost £300,000 in cash and £10 million worth of rent. And I did this at about the age of 24 years old, I think I was. So it was a really, really tough point in my life. And I want to shed light to everybody else that wants to jump into this industry, how this sort of stuff happens, okay? And this is me and Adam. This is my business partner, Adam. And this is a literal property that we gave to a social housing provider on a long-term lease. And this is how we got it back. Now, I'm sure a lot of you have seen this video on Instagram where the house got flooded. The provider was horrific. The provider went bust. I'm going to take you through that whole journey today and ultimately get you to a point where you can go and do this industry, but do it properly. Because 99% of people in this space haven't got a clue what they're doing. So let's jump straight into it. And there's no reason why, by the end of this video, you can't go and secure your own social housing and your own supported living leases on your properties, but knowing that you're doing it correctly, okay? And knowing that you're not gonna lose tens, if not hundreds of thousands of pounds by doing it. And I'm gonna go through what people think social housing and supported living is, all the rubbish that you see on social media. I'm gonna go through all of that stuff to tell you if it's actually true. I'm gonna tell you what it actually is. What is the difference? Because there is a key difference between all of these different industries, and everybody just clouds them all as social housing. How it's funded. Now, this is extremely important. You need to know how you are getting paid. It's like working for Amazon and not understanding how they're paying your wages. You know that by working for Amazon are an online retailer, they sell product, they make money, they can pay your wage. You know how it all works. In social housing, no one actually understands it. No one knows where the money comes from. Everyone assumes that it's a government contract. Now, we're also going to go through why providers go bust. And this is going to help you big time because you're going to end up figuring out why these providers go bust and how you can also stop it, and also how to get leases on your current or future projects. Now, a little bit of a plug, guys. I own the UK's most exclusive property network called the AFPI Network. And if you want to book a call in with me and you want me to help you raise money, you don't know where to start with property, you've got no support or guidance, listen, I literally own the best property network in the UK. So hit the link below, book in a call with me. No sales pitch. We are literally just going to show you exactly how we help people. So listen, if you want to do that, amazing. If you don't, no problem. Just keep watching this video and I'll tell you everything anyway. So who actually am I? Well, went to the University of Leeds to study geography. Pointless, I know. But I left university and I started deal sourcing. This went extremely well, and this is also what we can teach people. But we wanted more. We wanted to own property ourselves, and we did this in the social and supported living route. So we bought £6.5 million worth of property, which I did all of this by raising money. When I left university, I was in my overdraft. I didn't have any money. And this is where most people start, where they don't actually have much money to start in property, but you can still do it. And our current gross rent is about £79,000 a month from our HMO portfolio, and we're netting about £45,000 a month. Obviously, we have some costs to come off that in terms of taxes and some staff costs, but that's pretty much what we make. So we do all right. And a lot of people ask, what do I get out of these videos? Well, number one, I like sharing. Like, it's good to share. I want you guys to know all of the stuff that I know. Number two, I want you to join my property network. Listen, it's a plug. I want you to join it. It's the best network. It's going to help you out so much. And listen, if you're not asked about number 2, at least you can get some value from this video and think, all right, Aston knows what he's talking about. He's a decent guy. I'll keep watching his videos. So that's what I get out of these videos. Here's some proof. You can take a screenshot of this. I'm not going to go through them, but here's some of my rental statements. This is my HMO portfolio. As you can see, total investment £3.2 million. These are worth well over £4 million right now. We spent nearly £1 million on refurbs, £62,000 in stamp duty to HMRC. Always coming for you, aren't they? Let's be honest. And here's some of my companies. I have a lot more, but literally screenshot, go on company's house, do what you want to do. So you're going to go through loads of stuff in this video. Okay, I've got a lot of stuff to jump into, and it's super, super important that you understand all of this. And then at the end, I'm going to run through how you can actually lease these properties to a provider and build ultimately a steady income for yourself. So let's jump into it. What are people told social housing is on social media? You are told it's guaranteed rent, okay? You're told that it's a government contract and you're getting paid by the government. You're told that it's fixed income. This is the income you're going to get every single month if you sign a lease for 5 years, 10 years, 25 years, okay? Is this true? I'm going to jump into it. You're told that it's hands off. Now listen, this guy up here would probably tell you that it's not very hands off, looking at the state of that house. And so it's one of those things, guys. You're told all these things on social media. No maintenance cost is another one, okay? Is there really no maintenance cost? Well, listen, read the contracts properly, guys. There is maintenance cost, because when someone signs a lease for a supported living, when a supported living provider signs that lease, they do not sign a full FRI lease, which is a full repairing and insuring lease. Most of the time, and I mean 99.9999% of the time, they are signing leases where you still have an obligation to fix things outside of the property, the roof, any structural stuff. That isn't on the provider to fix. So when people say there's no maintenance costs, that's not entirely true. Just a bit of background as to why we need it. Listen, there's all these stats here. I'm not going to run through them all. January to March 2025, down here, the government reported 45,840 households were initially assessed as homeless, which is insane that we live in a country where there's so many people homeless. In 2023-24, council spent $2.29 billion on temporary accommodation. So this is like putting people up and paying a nightly fee into like a hotel or whatever that is. The council and the government don't want temporary accommodation because it costs them a fortune, okay? In 2024, 340,000 people were homeless, and 161,000 people, children, were in temporary accommodation, which is just a shocking stat, okay? So the social and supported living industry is massively, massively important. But what you need to understand is that there's a big difference, okay? Everyone clouds social housing as social housing is the industry. And that's not true. Social housing is split into a few different categories. So you have social housing, you have supported living, and then you've got specialist supported living. And there's a key difference between all of these. So let me jump into them. So supported living, okay? This is accommodation provided with support services. So when the provider gives you a lease for a property, these guys have to give support to the tenants, because the tenant demographic that is going into this property is people with additional needs. So people that are homeless that need support setting up banks. They need support, potentially coming off drugs or alcohol addiction, domestic violence victims, and obviously much more. And these tenant groups receive care. And therefore, this is why it's called supported living, because they are getting support. Now, this is extremely different to social housing. Social housing is housing that is provided by landlords and local authorities and housing associations, and the rent is paid via either a contract or the local authority. Okay, so when we're talking about social housing, these people don't get support because it's not supported living. So for me, if I was to choose which industry to go in, I would be choosing supported living because I know that the tenants are getting unbelievable support from the amazing job that support workers and local authorities do. So how does this actually work? So this is you are the landlord and you've got a property. You will literally find a provider and they will sign a lease that say, we're going to pay you £1,000 a month on the 7th of every month, and this is the lease that you are going to ultimately sign up to, and this is what our agreement is. Now the difference is this provider, they don't give any care to the tenant, whereas in supported living you have an extra sort of party involved. So you have a similar thing. You as a landlord give the provider a property, the provider gives you a lease, but then this provider also has support teams. And these support workers give care to the tenants that the provider has put into your house. So let me just go over that again. Social housing is no care. There's literally a contract in place for someone to go into that house and the rent is paid either by a tenant, housing benefit, government contracts. So this is where the government contracts come into place, and I'm going to go through that now. Actually, let me just jump straight into it. There's 3 government contracts in this entire country, okay, for social housing. 3. Serco, everyone knows Serco. Mears, most people know Mears, and Clear Springs. And these all operate in different parts of the country. And this is ultimately the government contracts for housing asylum seekers, as an example. So these people come in, they don't necessarily get care, they just pretty much get told how to live. Whereas supported living is obviously very, very different. So I've just given you the 3 biggest social housing contracts that actually have a contract with the government. You're talking billions of pounds worth of contracts with the government these providers have, whereas supported living providers are much smaller. These guys don't have government contracts. They are funded through the local authority. You've then got specialist supported living. Now this is for people with super high levels of needs. So it's similar to supported, but it's much more specialist. Therefore, the rent that you get is much higher. However, the quality of the property needs to be much different. You might end up doing adaptations to the property. You might make doorways wider for somebody who's in a wheelchair. You might need sensory rooms for someone who's got autism. And so this sort of industry within social housing, you could say, is for people with massive sort of additional needs. So learning disabilities, mental health, physical disabilities, or just older adults who need extra care and help. Now the way this works is very different. You as the landlord, you sign a lease with the RP. So an RP is a registered provider. Very, very different to a lot of supported living providers that are just limited companies or CICs, which is a community interest company. You sign this lease, but then the difference is there's a separate company here, a separate big outfit called a care provider. And this care provider signs an SLA, which is a service level agreement with the RP to provide high level specialist care. So that's the big difference, guys. And to be completely honest with you, I tried to break into this industry. It's extremely complex because you're dealing with, local authorities on a much deeper level. Obviously, you've seen that you've got an extra party involved as a care provider. Certain care providers don't like working with certain RPs, vice versa. Certain councils don't like working with certain RPs and certain care providers, vice versa. So it's a much harder industry to get into. But why do we actually need these providers? So we've got 3 providers up here. Why do we need them? They are our gateway to a council. It's extremely hard for me to go to a council and say, here's a house, please pay me rent, give me a lease. They ain't going to do it. They ain't going to do it. And if anyone's found a way that they can do that, give me a call because they ain't doing it. Housing benefit claimability. So I'm going to go through how it's funded in a second, but ultimately these providers have the ability to raise housing benefit claims, and also the council have the ability to pay these people. And it's also their game and not ours. I'm a social housing property investor developer. I'm a property investor who does private rented stuff. I'm a property investor who flips properties. I'm not a care provider. I'm not a support worker. that isn't my game. So some people think, oh, I could just set my own thing up. But you've got to think there's people that have been in this industry 20, 30, 40 years that are 100 times better than you are at it. So let them do what they do best. So let's go into how it's funded. Now, this is probably the most interesting part. And if you are getting into this industry, you need to know how it's funded. So let's look at social housing as an example. You have the DWP, so the Department for Work and Pensions, and the DWP funds these government contracts. So someone like a Serco, he gets a £2 billion government contract, whatever that number is, it's a crazy number. The DWP funds this contract. You then obviously have a lease with this contract, so one of these social providers, and they pay you out the money that the DWP has paid them. Now, this only works for 3 providers in the entire country. So when people say they've got government contracts, when they say they have a government contract and they house domestic violence victims, for example, I just know this isn't true, because the government contracts that are handed out are mostly to house asylum rather than domestic violence victims, to the best of my knowledge. Now, the other route in which it's funded is for more supported living, okay? And this money still comes from the DWP, but there's a few more sort of people and parties involved. So the money goes from the DWP, goes all the way down to a local authority. It then goes down to a CIC or a provider, okay? And then it reaches you as a landlord. So there's more parties involved. So the local authority, the CIC, and then you as the landlord. And I'm going to go through exactly how this works, okay? So what happens is the provider, they get a referral from the council, or they get a referral from a charity, okay? So it could be a recovering alcoholic that needs accommodation. The provider then goes to the local authority, and the provider needs to ensure that they've got specific support needs that meet exempt housing benefit requirements. This is key, because this is how the provider gets paid. And if they don't meet exempt housing benefit requirements or housing benefit requirements in general, this money flow from the DWP to local authority, it gets blocked here. If they don't meet the criteria, it gets blocked, because for them to unlock this money, for the local authority to unlock this money, they need to meet certain requirements. Okay? The provider then carries out compatibility assessments to ensure that, let's say you have a 4-bed HMO, to ensure that this person is compatible with the other 3 people in this house. Because we can't be having a alcoholic in there with a recovering alcoholic. We can't be having a 50-year-old man in there with a 20-year-old girl. It just doesn't work. It's not compatible. You'd want girls to be together so they can build relationships, etc., etc. What then happens is the provider gets the required documents from the tenant, so ID, proof of universal credit, proof of care needed, all of that stuff, and then the provider submits a housing benefit claim up here to local authority. The local authority then sit there when they get this claim and think, does this person meet housing benefit requirement? And this process usually takes 3 months. So it usually takes 3 months. And this is also why sometimes providers ask for a rent-free period, because if these guys aren't going to get paid for 3 months, how can you expect them to pay you? This is where it gets fairly amusing sometimes. The provider, when this is accepted, will then pay you the backlog, and then the provider pays every single 4 weeks or whatever is in the lease. The provider then has an obligation to provide a certain level of support to this tenant to continue getting the exempt housing benefit. So this is typically 3 hours of support per week per tenant, to obviously continue to carry on receiving payments from the local authority. The provider then also has to take care of the management, the maintenance, the compliance, the utility bills, and the council tax, etc. So what is claimed by a provider? I'm going to give you a good breakdown that no one has ever gone through. So the provider, when I'm talking about what claim they put in, it's this piece here. It's the housing benefit claim that they put into local authority. So it's essentially, what is the provider asking the local authority to pay for. So here's an example. So 1 bedroom in a HMO for a week. The provider might claim £300 to the council, okay? And within this, you might have support worker costs, 60 quid, utility bills, 25, council tax, 15, maintenance costs, so maybe a provision as 30, some compliance, which could be a tenner, and then the rent to the landlord. So when you're looking, let's say, north of Manchester, and you're looking at what rents they can pay you, you're typically looking about £75 per week per room. And this differs on various different local authorities because obviously you've got LHA rates, etc. And then there's a difference between the 300 minus these costs equals about this. And this is the provider's profit per week per room. So this is how providers make money. But why do they go bust? How did I lose £300,000? Well, they go bust because what happens is sometimes providers won't take on rent-free periods. So as a landlord, if a provider says they want a rent-free period of 3 months, you might sit there and think, well, I'm not going to get paid for 3 months. This is not very good. But it's actually a good thing because it means that that provider is typically sustainable because they understand that it's going to take them 3 months to get paid from the council. But what does happen sometimes, and what happened with me, is a provider takes on a property, they pay me from day one, but they're not going to get paid for 3 months. So they're in negative cash flow for 3 months, okay? So if they pay me £1,000 a month, they've lost £3,000 on my property. Now, when they do this on 10 properties, they've lost 30 grand. When they do this on 100, they've lost 300 grand. And the provider that we had was one of the biggest in the entire country, and they had 4,000 units. So you can imagine, 1,000 units is 3 million quid, okay? So you're talking about £12 million in missed cash flow. This is insane. So what some providers do is they take rent up front off you. So in this case, they take 12 months rent up front off me to ultimately cash flow the business. But what was happening, it was basically robbing Peter to pay Paul. So they'd take 12 months rent off somebody to lease the property. They'd then pay someone else's rent with this. And this might work on small scale. But when you get into 4,000 units, 10,000 units, 20,000 units, there's always going to be a cash flow problem. So what happened with me is we gave them £300,000 to lease X amount of properties. And after 6 months, they went bust. Pretty shocking. I know people that lost millions of pounds. And you might think, Aston, you are stupid for giving that money, but it worked. The model worked. They were the biggest in the entire country to the biggest funds in the entire country. So the model worked. In hindsight, do I regret it? No, because what we have now is a million times better and everything happens for a reason, and I've learned so many good lessons out of it. But our cash flow when we were on leases was 35 grand net a month. We went to zero overnight. We had 8 staff. It was one of the hardest points of my entire life. Huge struggles from a mental point of view. But it's business. It's life, and we recovered from it, and we're doing extremely well now. And I'm extremely grateful for that experience, to be completely honest. But hopefully this makes sense on how it's funded. I've gone through it quick, so if you need to go back and watch it again, go and do it. And if you need any help, just drop me a question below in the comments. But now let's look at a few different things, okay? So some more myths that I'll start busting. So lending criteria. People think that you can go and get a standard 2-bed house, go and rent it on a social housing contract, and just go refinance it on a mortgage. Is this true? Meh. Sometimes you can get lending on social housing contracts. 100% you can. And it's not that hard. But you need to know more about the whole situation to get lending. So what will happen is the lender's ultimately going to look at this as a commercial vehicle. They're going to look at it and go, well, this is not the same as a standard rental contract that I might have with Pete down the road. Okay, it's very, very different. The lenders are also cautious because if you're renting out to a family, the lender can ultimately come in, or if you own the property, and just kick you out and relist the property. Whereas if you're housing 4 homeless people, the lender would have to come in, kick out 4 homeless people, and what's going to happen? They're going to get loads of bad press. So lenders are very, very cautious due to defaults. The valuations might also be different due to the strength of the lease. So if the covenant of the lease is not very strong, which I'll go into in a second on how to get a good lease, the lender's going to think, well, this guy's been around for a year. He's never done social housing before. And now he's leasing a property for 25 years or 10 years or 5 years. Like, how is this working? So they're also very cautious on that. There's a very limited pool of lenders, which you need to understand. If you have a good broker, I have an amazing broker. I can definitely recommend you, but there's a limited pool of lenders. You're going to pay higher interest rates. It's just going to happen. You're not going to get the same interest rates as you get on a standard AST private rental. The loan to value might also be more conservative because the lenders 5 years ago didn't really understand the risks of the industry, and now they do because half the providers in the bloody country have gone bust. And then also the lease rent may exceed the market rent. So let's say the market rent's £800 a month in this area. Unsustainable providers might give you £1,200. So £400 more than what the market's giving you. And this is an unsustainable provider. And they do this to onboard properties to scale really quick and then go off into the sunset like the guy who I leased my properties to. For context, he took my money, he took loads of other people's money, you're talking millions of pounds, and moved to the other side of the world. That's what happened. That's the truth of it. So, just be cautious with lending on social and supported living properties, especially the specialist stuff. The interest rates can be crazy high. You're talking upwards of 9-10%. So just be very, very cautious. So how do we find providers? Very, very easy. Very easy, guys. Networks. So My Property Network, if you bought me a property in any location in the entire country, I'd probably be able to give you a provider on a plate. LinkedIn is a great way. I'm going to show you that right now. And also, fucking Google it. It's not hard. Let's look at LinkedIn. Let me get over to LinkedIn. Now, as I said, sometimes these providers are called CICs. So you could just type in housing CIC. And what's going to come up is loads of people that work at housing CICs. Okay, so this guy here obviously works for housing manager at RWP, Veteran Housing Group in Sutton Coldfield in Birmingham. This could be a decent provider. I'm sure they're very, very good. Trentway Supported Housing CIC, Falcon CIC, Insight Midlands CIC, Reliance Social Housing. And what I would do, here's a little trick. I'd click on this profile. I click on Reliance Social Housing as a business, and then you're also going to get on the right hand side pages that people have also viewed. Okay, click on show all. You're going to get a big list of fairly similar social housing providers. And I know a lot of them are amazing social housing providers, but it's just a good way of doing it. So use LinkedIn, connect to the people that work there, go meet them for a coffee, and ask them some good questions. Google as well. Just type in housing CICs in Manchester, housing providers in Birmingham, like whatever that is, just Google it. Or just ask someone who's got a good network and can just give you that. What do you need to ask? So when you're approaching these people on LinkedIn or meetings or whatever, you need to understand what are their requirements. And so you need to get the provider first and the property second. Because if you just go with a property and say, I've got this house here, it's in Birmingham, the provider might think, well, you've not even taken the time to understand my requirements because I'm not even looking in Birmingham. So you need to understand what the requirements are. What type of property are they looking for? Do they want HMOs? Do they want block of flats? Do they want single flats? Do they want standard family house? Do they want bungalows with adaptations? What do they want? What are the demand levels? You need to be asking that. Like, what's the demand in these certain areas? This gives you a good indication because if there's high demand, it means that their housing benefit claims to the council, if people meet the requirements, are going to get accepted fairly easy, and the tenants are going to get put in the property. If the tenants are in the property, it means the provider's getting paid. It means that it's a sustainable business model. If there's no demand, the provider's going to be paying you without getting paid themselves, and this is where they go bust. Support levels. What levels of support do you offer people? Super important to understand. Can you give me a rent matrix? Can you give me an area matrix? Now this is, can you tell me what area you're working in? And can you tell me the rents per postcode? So when you find a property in X postcode, you know what you're going to get paid. And what are the terms of the lease? Is it a 5-year lease, 10-year? Is there a break clause? When do you pay me? Is there a rent-free period? All of these different things, okay? And then lease terms. What lease terms do you need to look for? So the amount of rent, do we have a rent review every year? Does it increase CPI increase? What's the payment structure? Do we need a rent-free period? Who looks after the repairs? Like I said earlier, people think they've got full FRI leases. Well, if the roof caves in, you're going to have to fix it and you're going to think you're on a full lease, but you're not. Is there a break clause in there? And what condition are you going to return that property to me in? Super, super important, guys. Last couple of things from me. How do you know what a good provider is? And what DD do you need to do? So how do we make sure we find providers that are going to keep paying us and they're not going to go bust? You need to look. Are they financially stable? Go and look at their accounts on Companies House. If they've got management accounts, go have a look at them. Ask for them. If they have a lot of cash in the bank, they're financially stable most of the time. If they've got other assets, they might be financially stable. You can also see where most of their money comes from. And if it comes from capitalization fees, which is where people pay to lease the property, then it probably is an unsustainable provider. How quick are they growing? So a lot of people would think that if they're growing quick, this is great. If they're growing quick, this is bad, because they're going to have a backlog of payments from local authorities and they're still onboarding and they're still paying more landlords. So if they're growing quick, they're going to have cash flow problems. This is bad. How long have they been going? If they've been going 2 months, sack them off. If they've been going 2 years, have a conversation. If they've been going 20 years, jackpot. Have a check on the directors. This is sometimes funny, guys. There's some directors of housing providers, CICs, that aren't regulated, and previous jobs include working in a call centre. Previous jobs include working in a shop, being a bin man. Now, if someone was a bin man, I love bin men, they're class, right? It's a good job, I like it. Apparently you get a free brekkie in the morning. But if someone's gone from being a bin man to being a CEO of a housing provider within the last year, there's something wrong. Why is this person now a CEO of a housing provider? It doesn't mean don't have the conversation, because they might have been doing support work in the background for 20 years and they might have the best morals ever and amazing intentions. If that's the case, they're the people you want. But for a more generalist view, check the directors, because if they've done nothing in the industry before but now they're a CEO, it just stinks a little bit in my eyes. The rent levels. Have a look what the local housing allowance rates are in that area. So LHA rates is essentially the local housing rent rate that these local authorities will pay. If a provider is giving you way above LHA rates, this tells me it's unsustainable, because their profit margin, when we were speaking about the £85 earlier, is squeezing and squeezing and squeezing, which means, again, cash flow problems. Site visits. Can you go see any of the sites? And how do they speak? I've been to so many visits with providers and they've been talking about money. They've been talking about selling the properties and making money. That's my job. I'm the investor. Your job is to provide care and a really, really good service to people that need it. Your job isn't to go and sell properties and make a load of money off the back of your provider. Your job is to do good by your tenants and the people that you're supporting. So this is a big red flag for me. So what's my overall opinion? Be very careful. Very, very careful who you lease properties to. 75% of the industry are literally glorified scammers. Anyone can come at me for that. I will back it up with everything, because I've been scammed myself and it was the worst time of my life for 2 years. We're very, very fortunate. We're over it now. We have an amazing portfolio, a thriving property business, so many properties, and I'm able to live the life that I live right now. And the good ones are very good. We need to protect them. We need to work with them. We need to work, alongside them and help the housing crisis in the country and do the right due diligence. If you don't do DD, it's your fault. Give a good product. If you don't give a good product, hopefully the provider's not going to take it on. Okay? So do good DD, give a good product, and hopefully everything goes well for you. But hopefully that was helpful, guys. If you want to work with me one-to-one on a more intimate level, just hit the call booking link below. If you do it, you do it. If you don't, you don't. But anyway, lads, have a good one.